Hey everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network. So these are great leads. I'll be interviewing and having a conversation on these books. I want to get to those books that have contributed the most to who they are as a person, who they are as a business person, a worker, whatever it may be. All those worlds intersect. I want to get to that book that has made the most impact on them. And the three categories of books that I cover in this series are: the first category, a book they're sharing with me I haven't read. Second category, a book that we've both read that we're discussing, whether we read it specifically for the series or from our past lives before the series. The third category is when I have the author and or publisher on to discuss the book that they've put out, that they've had a hand in getting out to the masses. And they come on to talk about the messaging, and you can just hear a little bit of the tone of who that person is. And in this particular episode, my guest today is Alexandra Dotcheva. And born into a musician's family in Bulgaria, Alexandra came to the United States as a graduate student in 2000 and earned a doctorate of musical arts in violin performance from Louisiana State University in 2007. In 2008, prompted by the financial crisis, she decided to pursue a career in nursing and has been practicing as an RN since 2011 with a strong passion for educating patients on acquiring optimal health. Her experience includes ICU, orthopedic trauma, and home care. In 2014, she began her investing career with a focus on rental real estate and later on options trading. She's the owner of 3 real estate businesses and a holistic coaching business. Alexandra's passion for health, martial arts, fitness, and financial independence, as well as her experience with the challenges of cultural integration, prompted her to write the book, It Really Is Simple, A Holistic Approach to Self-Confidence, in which she shares her path to success in an effort to motivate readers to embrace change and pursue their dreams in spite of fear and insecurity. And I had met Alexandra when she reached out, having heard about the series, what we cover here, the experiences, the stories of the guests, whether they're an author or not. She wanted to share her own experience, her story, her history. And here she is. I'm glad that she's joining me. So Alexandra, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, John. Pleasure to be here.
So I always start off with, who are you? Obviously in the bio, it goes through the different areas of work that you have going on and businesses that you have running. What does that look like in the day-to-day? How do you, with so many areas you need to cover, what does your day-to-day look like, Alexandra?
Oh, it's really, really amazing to be able to do so many things, especially if you have a history like I do of over 20 years of very poor self-confidence and self-esteem, with never believing you would ever be able to accomplish even a fraction of what it is today. But it's a great lifestyle. Obviously, I don't play the violin anymore because once I entered the workforce as a nurse in 2011, that whole nearly 30 years experience had to change and stop and go to something else, because I felt like I had so much to catch up on life, on real life, which I missed a lot while I was practicing between 4 walls as a violinist. But being a healthcare professional, tremendous responsibility, especially educating patients how to not be assets to the healthcare system. That is my biggest priority as a healthcare professional, working with patients hands-on. And as an investor with the financial independence, it's just about choices in life and being able to draft your own life day to day, year to year, every 5 years, every 10 years, without depending on a job necessarily, if need be, to change your careers or places in life, because many things happened in the last 2-3 years with the pandemic and people were deprived of choices for all the wrong reasons. So I wanted to avoid that, even though when I started investing in 2014, I mean, neither I nor anybody else could foresee the pandemic situation. And then as far as the coaching, that naturally evolved from the book and my experience with people who knew me and said, how did you manage to do that when you were so insecure and in many ways really completely unwilling to venture into anything new for so long as a musician? And today's life is basically a whole chain of goals and events that happen, aiming towards bigger goals, accomplishing smaller goals, and teaching others how to do that. That they really, you can see they want to do it, but they just feel so intimidated by the fear of failure, the unfamiliar, the unknown, the uncomfortable, and basically I try to impress on everybody that you have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable if you want to make any progress with your life. And I learned this from one of my mentors, Kim Kiyosaki. So yeah, I'm grateful for that.
So how do you make that work then? Balancing your businesses, working as an RN. What is that? How do you even handle that? I can imagine you running from place to place, especially, real estate, having different properties and whatnot. What is it that works for you? What is your process for making all those initiatives, all those endeavors work?
So there is a variety of things I do. For one thing, I have structured my working schedule in a block of 3 days a week that never changes. Okay, so I'm a weekend nurse. I visit my patients. We do all the education, everything I have to do to intake to home care, because I work for an agency that has made me their main weekend startup care nurse. So that's a very responsible job. You have to assess all the needs of the patient. So that's one chunk of the week. The remaining 4 days, I do the coaching. I do my video materials, my investments, whatever needs to be done. I manage all of my businesses happily, and my tenants are extremely reliable to voice their needs. I have a team of excellent contractors to do work, and we manage the time at mutual convenience, and it has worked great. I have been in this business for 10 years already, so I have made it work, and it takes a lot of trial and error with time management. And this type of discipline is the most important in any endeavor, and especially when you're leading so many businesses. You just have to know how to not waste your time. Prioritization, including with relationships, especially because you know how people can take a lot of your time for all the wrong reasons again. And you need to know how to set limits. You need to know, prioritize where you really need to be for crisis or a specific moment that it's you that has to handle it and nobody else can do it for you. And that's how it basically works in a nutshell. Of course, there is a lot more detail to that, and it all depends on the situation. So it works.
And when it comes to your coaching, what kind of services do you provide? Is it one-on-one? Is it group coaching? What do the coaching services look like?
It really is one-on-one, because I'm a holistic coach, and I coach health optimization, financial freedom, career choices, relationship prioritization, and then just the spiritual part as far as clearing your mind and staying inspired, all these both aspects of the mind clarity and the inspiration. So every person has different problems. Usually, most frequently, you can see crisis in relationships, finances, and health. These are the three big ones. But then you go into the career and spiritual aspect that also contributes to the problematics of a person's experience. And I prefer the one-on-one because I give them every week we meet for an hour. First of all, there is a free session at the beginning to see if we are good for each other as a coach and client, between 1 and 3 hour conversation, which I don't charge anything. And then it's a 12-week program. I meet them every week, once a week for an hour. There are these assignments, though, that the modules that they last 2-week modules, and there are pretty steep assignments that I count them for every week. And with every assignment, time management is the one of the priorities. But then they have the tasks to do specific things about their health, career, finances. It's all about mindset. And depending on the problem, then we do specific assignments to see how we can reverse like a chronic health condition, because 95% of the chronic conditions are completely reversible. We're talking a lot about lifestyles, and the lifestyle just encompass your health. It's a whole holistic thing with your career mindset and your financial mindset, what types of food or entertainment you spend your money on, and why can't you invest money because you're short of money, but you shouldn't be short of money. It's all a connected whole of the person. And I have found that individual coaching works the best for every person, because no one size fits all. And all that group think, I know it saves a lot of time, and it provides more opportunity for gaining money faster as a coach, but it's just not one of my things.
Yeah. So when it comes to your one-on-one coaching, do you have clients where their needs with the work that they do crosses over from fitness to financial independence? Or is it just a client has fitness needs or health needs, or a client has financial needs? Are there clients that kind of you work with them across those different areas?
They like to fixate on one thing that they believe is the problem, which is never their biggest problem, because they like to evade the biggest problem. So I start asking questions because I'm a registered nurse and I assess patients on a daily basis. So the questions I ask we always touch on all the areas. And it turns out that there is a much bigger problem in another area of life, could be the finances, more so than the fitness area, which is in the health aspect. And then we find out why are you working 12 hours, 6 days a week and don't have time to go to fitness? What are your career choices? Why have you not learned, why can't you learn 3-4 more marketable skills to make yourself more accessible to other employers that maybe allow for a shorter work regimen? I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. And most people like to avoid the biggest elephant in the room, which is usually a problem in a different area than the one that they come to me for. But it takes maybe a week to gain their confidence and trust to really go into that. And then we find out, look, if you solve this, then that problem that you came to me for in the first place almost becomes non-existent. And that's how we make it work, because you have to understand the 5 aspects of their lives and their approach to these aspects, because people like to neglect important areas of their lives. And that's where they lose control and confidence and self-esteem for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, it's amazing with people generally across different areas you can talk about how often their problems don't come from proactive work that didn't work out or they quote failed at, but it's more stuff that they don't pay attention or that they tolerate, just things that they turn away from that they just allow to happen.
That's right. And in many cases, they already know the answer, but they want somebody else to say it because, again, it's just shifting of responsibility and the procrastination element, right? But once it's said, and of course, I approach my clients differently from the way I approach my patients, because I'm very blunt with all of them, but the patients are legitimately acutely sick at the moment and they have many problems. But when somebody comes to me as a client, we already have the agreement that they really are committed to changing their lives. And then you have to be honest with them in a respectful manner, but firm, but setting limits with their, argumentation, justification, rationalizations. You got to teach them sometimes the difference between an argument and an excuse, because many of them don't quite know that difference, or they know it in one area of life, but in the other areas, somehow an excuse is an argument. And we say, no, that's not an argument. That is an excuse. And to be able to hold ourselves accountable, we really need to know the difference between an argument and an excuse in all of the important life areas, which is the health, spiritual area, career, finances, and relationships. Yeah. They all have their own excuses and arguments, and a lot of things towards excuses is what I notice at the beginning of our coaching sessions.
Yeah. And so often they don't express that to anybody. They don't share that with anybody. They just kind of suffer in it. Or they surround with people that enable them, or just kind of say, no, you're doing fine. No, it's not that bad. But
or just don't even confront them. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Alexandra, when it comes to you, in order to understand later when we talk about the book and where you're coming from and who you are and how you got to this point, can you tell me a little bit about how your career started in terms of, or not even career, like when you were young going into your whether it was education or you went straight into the workforce, what did those first couple steps into building your career, what did they look like? And then what did it look like until now? Kind of just an overview of your career that walks us to where you are now.
So you mean the violin career or overall? Because
just overall.
Overall. Well, so, I mean, I was born in a musician's family, so there was not much room for negotiation as to what I was going to do with my life. Yeah. And plus, you gotta be fair though to my parents. We were in the socialist era, former socialist country, and being a classical musician was prestigious. So they were musicians. They wanted me to also tap into that field, and they felt that they could show me the best, what they knew the best. And it involved tons of hours of practice because when you were 5 or 6, I mean, practicing 3 hours a day seems like a lot of time. Although in Japan, kids practice 10 hours a day from age 6 or 7, but I didn't know that at the time. Yeah. So when teenage and early 20s, I developed a horrific stage fright because my practicing wasn't really the way my father wanted, and because I think very fast, but I didn't realize my hands and my fingers weren't responding as fast as my brain was. So I didn't master certain important techniques with the technical aspect from the pure instrumentation side of the violin, to allow me to perform 100% on stage. And then it involved a psychological problem, and that's where my self-confidence crushed over the course of 10, 15 years. And when the financial crisis hit in 2006, 2008, orchestras started bankrupting in America left and right, including my former employer, the Syracuse Symphony Orchestra, in 2011. We were bankrupted then, but I already had the job waiting in the ICU for me upon nursing graduation. But those years, 2006, 2008, is where it became really bad for me psychologically, because I knew I wasn't competitive enough to survive in America when you compete in an orchestra audition with 40 to 500 people for one spot. Okay, so that was really a rough reality. And I had to face that after being a violinist for 26 years. So all my sense of entitlements that people should, because I don't know how familiar you are with the orchestras in the United States versus Europe, but in many European countries, governments spend money. They give money for their cultural institutions like symphony orchestras. They value them as an asset to the country and the population, the education, the culture. In America, it's not like that. It's all private sponsors, rich people who want to support the arts, great. And if there are not enough rich people in the city to support you, good luck, right? So many musicians in America, there is this entitlement sense that, oh, the community needs us, we're special, we this, we that. Well, not really though, because when you bankrupt, something proves you otherwise. In the case with Syracuse Symphony, it was bad because due to the high taxation policies of New York State, extremely corrupt government, and I mean, the tax money doesn't go to anything good, because if you drive through the roads, it's like driving through some Bulgarian roads. You can break your car easily, right? But they drove all the businesses out of central upstate New York, and then there was nobody to support the orchestra, really. A massive business that would like to invest in the cultural development of the city. So the orchestra, to the present day, to my knowledge, hasn't recovered its full-time status. So that's where I figured I have to do something that's needed to society, because obviously I'm not needed as a musician to society, and I'm not as good as I wanted to be, considering that I spent so many years practicing. I practice 9 hours a day, that was my routine. And when you don't pan out on stage the way you want, it really bites, it really hurts, and can crush you. But I learned that nursing was in demand all over the world, not just in the United States. I learned there was a shortage. It was great. I also understood that when it's a shortage, that means there are lots of people that don't want to do this work. So it must be hard work to do. It must be difficult, responsible. So it's a challenge. And I thought, okay, I have the brain to learn. I have photographic memory. I can read 9, 10, 11, 12 hours a day instead of practicing 9, 10, 11 hours a day. And if I do that, I'll remember, I'll build a scientific vocabulary, which I completely lacked in English or in Bulgarian, because I studied in a specialized nursing school for 12 years, from the 1st to the 12th grade, then 11 years in college, strictly music subjects. So no science base at 32 years old, okay? So I reversed the habit. I started reading 11, 12, 13 hours a day. Sometimes I read it till 3 o'clock a.m. because I was working 3 jobs at the time to support myself, and the concerts with the Syracuse Symphony, I was part-time. So it was very, interesting, but I knew that I was starting something completely new, and I could forget about all the insecurity and self-inflicted lack of confidence, and I could start fresh. And that's what turned my life around. And then I became a nurse. And in 2014, I saw that I already knew that the nurses weren't living the wonderful lives that we were told in nursing school. That it was great to be a nurse. You're very appreciated. Yes, you were, but you're also burnt out and high turnover in most institutions. So I said, I want to remain a nurse, but I don't want that to be my only option. And I knew I was financially illiterate, just like I was science illiterate 4 years earlier. And that's where I also decided I had to fill that gap in my knowledge, because none of my parents or friends had any financial literacy beyond paying your credit card bills and balancing a checkbook and paying your house over the course of 30 years. I knew that was not really nearly enough to survive well in a shaky economy. And that's what prompted me to buy mentorship for investing in real estate and really get serious about that. So everything adding up, when you realize that you can do one major change with your life, that's the crucial thing. Your mindset switches. You do one major change that was seemingly impossible, then you can do another one, and then another one. And each next change is not nearly as dreadful as the first one. That's like buying your first investment property. It's a horrific moment because so many things you have to learn. You have to find the money, especially you were a tenant like me 14 years before you wanted to buy a multifamily property. The lenders weren't thrilled. I spoke with 16 of them before I could find the financing I wanted. So just don't give up, okay? And every next acquisition is easier and easier and easier because you already have the experience. Yes, they're all different. They'll all present different challenges. Every new change in your life will present different challenges and responsibilities, but you've done it before under different circumstances.
Yeah, it looks different.
Exactly. And it's just a great thing to realize, and you're unstoppable after that. But it's just the trigger, that first moment of overcoming your own entitlements, that everybody has to feel sorry for you and encourage you. And if they don't encourage you, can't do it. That's so not true. So not true. Because all the major successes in my life, decisions like going into martial arts, changing the career, then going to investing, all of my close people were against these things. And those were the best things I ever did for myself. So be very careful who you listen to, because the influences in your life, they're very well intentioned, but oftentimes they're wrong. And that's where.
Yeah, and they're going by what works for them. They're going by their own insecurities. They're going by their own fears. But not every person has that same threshold. But you can be convinced that you should heed my fears, my insecurities.
Yes.
Like
Absolutely.
if I'm in your ear, drilling it in your head, no, be careful, no, don't do that. And that's all you have surrounding you. That's, you can paralyze yourself. Alexandra, so for you, from your youth to your career as a nurse, was that all violin focus?
Yes, sir.
Was there other? Okay, so it was all violin focus. How did you end up in the States? How did you end up? I believe it was in Louisiana for the musical program.
Yes, yeah, for the master's and doctoral degree. Well, my parents programmed me from a very early childhood that I had to get out of Bulgaria. So what happened was we lived 3 years in Mexico when I was a kid. From age 3 to age 6, my father was a double bass player in the Filarmónica de la Ciudad de México, in the Mexican Philharmonic Orchestra. And then my mother felt nostalgic for Bulgaria, so they made the tremendous mistake of moving back during communism. And they couldn't buy anything as far as housing that they wanted. I mean, lots of failures in their lives. And they said, you absolutely have to get out of this country. This is a dead end here. Then in 1989, the wall fell. And everything about culture started deteriorating because the new priorities of the politicians were not culture. So then they really drilled into me that I had to move out. And so I tried several European countries, I auditioned here and there. And then I met my wonderful teacher who passed away this year, unfortunately, Bork. He was a Bulgarian Armenian who worked in Louisiana State University at the time. Later on, he moved to Bloomington, Indiana, but he came every year to Bulgaria to audition people, to give a master class. And that's, my mother met him and she said, hey, why don't you talk with Kevork Mardirosyan? See, he seems like an extremely genuine, excellent violinist and teacher. So we met, I played for him, and he says, yeah, what do you want to do? I said, well, I would like to be your student if you don't mind. And he said, yeah, sure, well, let's do that. So you need to pass a TOEFL test, all the recordings with my playing for him to prove that I was legit for the university. And that's how it happened. And I embarked in August of 2000. I became a student in Louisiana State University. It was a big, big change. It was wonderful, wonderful opportunity.
And how did martial arts factor into, where did that come up in your life?
Yeah, that's described this in chapter 1 in the book. That was funny because it was a dream of mine since the 2nd or 3rd grade. During the socialist times, they were playing all these Chinese martial arts movies. Those were my favorite movies and they were bullies at school, of course. And I wanted to beat them up, but I didn't know how. And I really wanted to be a martial artist. I secretly practiced in our shared bedroom with my parents, but when my parents were out of the bedroom, I practiced karate, so to speak, from what I had seen in the movies. And I told my father once about that, and he burst. He screamed, how dare you? You're going to break your fingers. You won't be able to play the violin. Oh, it was crazy, 15 minutes of him loading his emotions of my daring to practice something without his knowledge. And so that was buried. But then in the States in 2006, when I moved to Syracuse, New York, there happened to be a dojo half-mile from the house that I was at. And so,
Which discipline?
It was first it was Kempo, which I did for 2 years, but then I switched to Shorin Goju karate with a fantastic teacher, a national champion master, Greg Tierney's martial arts, and his amazing wife, Judy Mudafri Tierney. So that was where I earned my black belts, because their standards were great, and they drilled us like you won't believe. But that's where I got my black belts in Syracuse. And then when I moved to Arizona, nobody was teaching this style. So I did Aikido for 2 years. And then I got tired of the politics in the dojo. Every dojo has politics, but I was like 40 at that time. 40, I was like, you know what? No, I'll just hit the fitness real hard. And ever since then, the last 7 years, I've been like a fitness freak, 2.5 hours a day with my own program and everything. But martial arts, it just builds so much confidence in you. That's what I really wanted, besides the physical aspect, because everybody can learn a technique. I really wanted the technique and the knowledge that if somebody makes me upset, I can virtually beat them up. I won't do that because they're not worth going to jail, but it's a very nice feeling that you can do something else besides just listening to them talk. And I wanted to be able to defend myself, because every woman, I think, should be able to defend herself. But the martial arts dojo, Greg Tierney, was a great impact, because they taught us black belt mentality. So to build the mindset to really do what you need to do in real life, the real dojo called life, right? You need to have the self-discipline, the self-respect, the perseverance, respect for others, and truly the ability to apply yourself even when nobody's watching to do the right thing. Integrity. Okay, so they taught all that along with the technique, and that was really great for my confidence and
You've spoken about yourself, your experience. Obviously, your book is about, and we'll get into that in a minute, about, the confidence, what it takes to turn things around, to believe in yourself. Was it, I think, because you had come to the States for school, then you went into martial arts, then you went into nursing. Where was that turning point where your confidence began to shift? Was it when you came over from Bulgaria to Louisiana for the musical program? Was that when it started when you were out on your own in a different country? Was it when you went into the martial arts? When did it start turning for you?
It started when I decided to become a nurse. Because when I came to the States, I was 24, and I still had that dread from stage, and I performed very poorly on orchestra auditions for the first several years, which was the most important thing, was to, win auditions. And it was a really, really difficult time for me with stage fright. So I carried that fear from Bulgaria, and I couldn't overcome it until I decided, you know what, I have too much bad history with this profession. Let's do something new. Nobody knows me in nursing and medicine, so I can start from scratch, and that's where it shifted. I already was very close to earning my first black belt, and that helped too. But professionally, to me, the problem was professional. I just wanted to prove to myself that I can be a good professional person and help people and be valued for who I was, and that was the important part with me, and that's where it shifted.
Okay.
With nursing, because you put yourself.
That's what I was going to ask, because I was surprised that it didn't. Nothing against nursing, not taking anything away from nursing, but I was surprised to hear that it started at the point where you took on nursing and not when it was in the martial arts, where you spoke about how it built up your confidence. But then you clarified the majority of what we're talking about here is that professional, is that career oriented confidence. So that clarifies that. Thank you so much. Alexandra, when it comes to you, how do you reconcile between who you were as a kid and the work that you're doing now? Not that you knew you were going to end up doing all these things specifically, but where does who you were as a child come through or not in the work that you do today?
It absolutely does. In order to succeed so much, you have to awaken the child in yourself that is dormant for so many years, because the curiosity of the child, the beginner mindset of the child, is what really it helps with every major change in your life. And that's what I discovered. And when I discovered it, John, it was so ironic, because they made me do all these prerequisite science classes before I could even apply for nursing school. So my mother is petrified. How are we going to do math? I said, Mom, forget the math. What about the chemistry? And she's like, I don't even want to think about it. And so she was horrified. And I started these math classes and the chemistry class, the hardest classes, presumably. And I feel how my brain is growing and awakening. It's like, oh my God, I'm living a new life with math and chemistry. That never thought that would happen. But that's where the child all of a sudden said, hey, let's learn this and this and this. Studied 2 more 3 hours. I studied 9 hours a day math and chemistry to catch up with what most of the kids knew. I was 32 and I aced all these classes, but it was really the curiosity. I suddenly felt like I was 20 years younger for all the good reasons, because I wanted to know so bad and compete with myself and prove to myself that I would do it. It was not a burden anymore, learning all these new things. I stopped dreading it all of a sudden. And then I knew I was going to succeed in nursing, because that program was, it beat us up with all these thick textbooks, which I read most of them twice before the classes even started, right? But the child curiosity, that's where you connect to your child. When you start making all these changes, I discovered that was very useful. And I didn't know that had happened at the time, because you don't really process what exactly is happening.
Yeah, that's one of those things where you kind of understand it in hindsight. But at that point, your nose is in the books all the time, so you have no...
Right. That's right. And then I recently, the last year, I came across the Silva mind control method. And when they talk about developing your intuition and your manifestation skills, they talk about you need to go back to your child curiosity, and you have to evoke that child. It's like, oh, yes, that feels very familiar now. And that kind of closed the circle. I answered that question.
Wait, what did you say, Alexandra? Did you say you have to love that child? Is that what you said?
You have to accept the child for who
that is what you said, right?
No, to get back to the child curiosity, okay. To understand how you develop intuition and manifestation skills, because of the willingness to know without fear of failure, because the child doesn't know how to fail. They're just curious.
Yeah.
Then the adults teach them how to fail.
Until the adults, indoctrinate them and make them feel terrified, and you all have to look the same, feel the same, act the same, talk the same. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. And it is incredible, because so many of the people that I know, whether I've coached them or not, whenever they got to a point in their life where they felt fulfilled, where they felt their own definition of success, didn't have to be money or accolades or awards, like their own definition of just peace, right?
Yes.
Whenever they got to that point, it's because, if they look at it, it's because they went back to what that childlike mind, that seeking wonder, fulfillment. What is it that makes me happy?
That's right.
Before you start thinking about society and what will people think and what should I be doing? No, what do I want to do? It's amazing. When my favorite thing in the last 8 years has been watching my kids play and learn. I have an 8, a 5, and a 2-year-old. And you can see the 8-year-old starting to change, because he's seeing that kids are starting to get in groups, and he's in a group of kids. And but the younger they are, it's all about play. It's all about what I want. It's all about what I want to touch, what I want to discover, what I want to look for, what I want you to give me. So it's very me, but in that sense of they're discovering the world, and they're putting new words to it. So I've rediscovered so many things because I get to see it through their eyes. So I love when someone brings that up, because it's just so powerful.
Yes, and you were right when you asked that if I said that you have to love the child in yourself. Yes, you should. Yes, you should love the child in yourself, because when you are a child and everybody tells you, that's wrong, or if adults or your peers resent you, you don't really hate them. You start hating yourself gradually for not being able to conform to their wishes and please them and make them happy, that would make you happy. And I was a very socially awkward child, okay? So I felt that, and you need to love the child in yourself if you find that child. And it's not easy, but it's doable. It's doable with the experience and some strong will on your part.
Yeah, because when you do get to the point where you look back and think about what you needed as a child, it's humbling. It's humbling. You once you really start looking for it in earnest, when you really start to look at and understand your past, why you are certain ways, whether it's insecurity or not. I mean, just through these conversations, in the conversations when it comes out about kids, just through those conversations, I've looked back at my past and been like, okay, that's why I'm like this. That's why my personality quirk is this. That's why I'm unsure of myself at these times. So it's incredible to look back. And it does take some bravery, because there's so much power looking back at yourself, looking yourself in the eye and saying, okay, it's a vulnerability, I guess, is looking back and
Very
saying,
much
okay,
so.
I am this vulnerable. This is where it comes from, but it doesn't have to remain that way. I can turn it around at this point and move forward.
Well, yeah, we have tried to suppress so many memories for a reason, because we're
Yeah.
just ashamed, we're embarrassed, or whatever it is. But it has to, you have to face yourself at some point, and you have to start from the bottom, which is your childhood, your earliest age. And it takes a while to go through that process. And if you extract just the great experience from that, then you'll be doing very well. If you don't dwell on the bad experiences, because we all have different experiences, and some people are really traumatized from their childhoods.
Absolutely.
I'm fortunate to say I'm not. I mean, my parents really did their absolute best. Now, did they always make the right decisions? Of course not, but they influenced me in many ways, and I had to discern the influence that didn't work, really, even in their lives. But again, you just do it without prejudice, without grudges, without blaming, and because, I mean, nobody tries to be a horrible parent. Well, some people do, but of course, mine weren't that case. And I
but
was
in
very
general,
fortunate. In many ways. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Alexandra, when it comes to you, I'm a leadership coach, so I'm always curious, and you're a coach yourself. What does great leadership look like to you? What does great leadership mean? How do you define it? What does it look like?
Well, you have to lead by example. You should be willing to do everything that the people you're leading are supposed to do. You don't shy away from the activities that, if, say, you're an employer, or you tell people to do certain things that they're supposed to do, but you need to be willing to do them yourself, because you're not above these people in any way. Okay, so you have to be humble. You need to know how to set the proper limits respectfully as a leader, and you have to understand where people come from. So you need to be able to hear them and understand their deeper motives, because everybody has a deeper motive they're not revealing at first. And if there are things that you can work with to reverse like a poor mindset as far as work ethic, you do your absolute best to do that as a leader. And there are many ways to do it, especially if you make the people understand that the benefits for them to grow a great work ethic without compromise. I think that's the big thing of leadership, because many leaders just try to avoid responsibility by blaming other people, but you need to get under the person's skin in a way that they really see the benefit for them, because after all, they are under your leadership to gain something out of the whole relationship. And it's just as important to them as your leadership is important to you. And you have to respect, and the boundaries they put between you and them sometimes are for a reason, because they're either afraid you won't understand their struggles. And in that case, conversations and communication, very, very important as a leader.
Alexandra, at this point, we can jump into your book. Would you mind introducing the book and then just giving some backstory on how the book came to be?
So the book is called It Really Is Simple, A Holistic Approach to Self-Confidence, a practical guide. The book came into being because those who knew me very well said how, because they know I was very unconfident for over 2 decades. And then they saw all the things I accomplished, not just with the career change, which was huge, because most of my friends were musicians at the time. Okay, so they really couldn't believe that that was doable, and because many musicians don't believe they can learn anything else professionally besides music after being in music for so long. And then with the investment career that took off after 2, 3, 4 years of learning curve, and people started asking questions. Okay, so how do you manage all that? How do you do 3 real estate businesses and the career, and you go to the fitness 4 days a week, and you're so healthy, you're eating whole food, organic, vegan. How do you find time to cook and all that? I mean, just trivial questions, but they all boil down to the organization and the mindset and the self-discipline with all these 5 aspects. And then people who didn't know me well at all, but were seeing what I was able to do, also was starting to ask similar questions. It was like everywhere. Everybody was asking, how do you do that? I wish I could do that, but I can't. How do you organize yourself like that? How do you say no to these people? And I said, well, it's not hard. You just stick to your goals. And then the idea of the book came very easily, because it basically, I asked, okay, so I have to give all these answers, but what would be the book that I would love to have been able to read in 2008 when I had to change careers? And the structure of the book came into my brain in a matter of 2 minutes, basically. That's all it took. Then I wrote it in 6 months. It took to write 400 pages. And then I had to edit it for a while, because I'm a foreigner and I wanted to have a good vocabulary, not to repeat myself. When you write 400 pages, you need to make sure that you really don't repeat. You have to get a decent vocabulary to capture a reader. So I knew that before I even offered the book to a professional editor. And so then we went with the editor 4 times, back and forth. And that was it. But the idea was there from the very beginning. I knew exactly what I wanted to write about. And that helped. It wasn't a struggle finding ideas for a book. It just came to me right away when I said, what would I have wanted to read in 2008 when I started on that, about my health, about my career, about my mindset, keeping myself sane during all the work I did, financial growth, wealth building, perpetual wealth building, and then relationship prioritization. And that was it. The book just magically came into, and it just had to be written.
Yeah, sometimes the hardest part is just starting. And then everything kind of, especially with your experience, is relatively fresh in your mind. What year did you start writing the book, Alexandra?
I started writing it in January of 2020, and by July 2020 it was done. Wow. Then I edited for a year very diligently. I had to go 50 times over the whole material to edit it. I was editing 3 to 8 hours a day. I mean, I when I put my mind into something, I just, like a dog on a bone, I don't let go until. And then when I couldn't add anything else, I said, okay, so now it's time to offer this book to a professional editor.
Yeah.
And he helped quite a bit. We had some disagreements, of course, because I can be very abrasive with my writing about things I'm convinced. And he said, well, you don't want to alienate the reader. And I said, but we don't want another self-confidence book that's sugar-coated in wonderfulness. That's not what I'm about. I'm from the Balkan Peninsula. We're not nice people for the most part. So this has to show in the book, because really, with the editor, it's interesting because they want to get their ideas, but then if somebody who knows you reads the book, they'll know that's not your book if it sounds like the editor and not like you. So I have to explain this to them, and you have to be sincere and genuine, with the risk that you might alienate several people. And then I remember I told this to my mother over Skype, and she laughed for 5 minutes, because she is the most renowned music critic in Bulgaria. I mean, her articles have torn apart so many people, and some articles are, of course, wonderful, depending on what performance she goes to. But she says, can you imagine the reader gradually alienating himself and just disappearing in the distance? And I'm like, Mom, you know all about that, right? So she was laughing, said, listen, write your heart and take the advice that it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, just reject it. And I mean, it's a collaboration between you and the editor. So it was a fascinating process.
Is there an example of not specific, but just a general example or an area where you had written about in the book and a version you sent to them, and they're like, hey, can you kind of tone it down and make it a little more, I don't know, friendlier, lighter, sugarcoat it? Is there something that stands out where they gave you that kind of feedback?
There were like 15, 20 examples in the book. And I said, look, no, they need to know, because when I say that something is a stupid decision, he said, well, why don't you say problematic? And then we found a consensus, something in the middle that is not as kind, but not as harsh. You learn a lot of synonyms and almost near synonyms. You really expand your vocabulary when you're working with an editor that you disagree with. Okay, that's very prompts you to learn in a different way. So my English improved significantly with the writing, and I'm always better in writing than spoken. But we had tons of disagreements on that. And then there were certain words that he wanted to put in the book, and I asked several people, do you know what this word means? I've never heard about it. So we're not putting that word. Everybody knows I don't know that word. That's not my vocabulary. So no, it's a find a balance between somebody who is majored in English and they really don't want to show there. It's no, that's not, it's my book. It has to be accessible to people. And if you're using words that nobody knows, It's not a good idea in a book that's title says it really is simple. So we have to keep it accessible.
I think
and
it is
understandable.
powerful. It is necessary to negotiate that, to find a
Mhm.
balance, because there's books everywhere on leadership, and people always ask me, how can you read so many books on leadership? And there's different eras of leadership, but some of those books overlap on the topic, because each author has their own voice, their own experiences, their
Exactly.
own
That's right.
temperament. You can read it in the language that they choose. There are various authors that stand out where I've read them, and they're known for being in your face. I mean, if you read a David Goggins book, he's a Navy SEAL, takes no shit,
What was
turned
it?
his life around.
4,067 pull-ups in 17 hours?
Something like that.
I
Yeah.
can only do 100 in a gym session.
Let's not even talk about what I can do, but that's neither here nor there. But it's just interesting that, he's got his unique take. He's got his history that makes him who he is and how he expresses himself. If it were too sanitized, people would know it's not him. They may hear him on a podcast, they may see him on a television show, and then pick up his book. And if somebody over sanitized it, it's like, who is this? Put down that donut that's very problematic, do some salad, it's healthier for you. Where he'd probably say, like, put the fucking thing down, stop doing that stupid shit. You're doing it to yourself. Then people would be like, okay, this is really him. So I appreciate you sharing that there has to be that balance.
Absolutely. I mean, and of course, the editor has the best intention too, like your parents, basically.
Yeah.
This is set in stone. It's written. Okay, so somebody buys it, you can't erase it, you can't edit it anymore. It's not like your online blog. It's a responsibility, and I appreciated it. It was a great learning experience. But I did keep many of the, and there was another thing actually, which was a compliment, but I rejected that too, because apparently he was impressed with many of the conclusions or paragraphs that I did. So I had minimal italicized when I really wanted to emphasize a point. Minimal italicized. He returned the book the first time with paragraphs italicized. I said, no, that's waters out the value of italics. So we're gonna keep it to the minimum. So he reversed everything back to normal. And the italics are there for a reason. They're not to be abused. But I mean, if you were impressed, great, thank you. But everything is important in the book. So I don't want people to think that only the italicized paragraphs are what they should pay attention to. And that was another interesting, I never expected that, but that was fun to see how another person thinks.
So when it comes to your book, Alexandra, what's the overview of the book? What's the path you take the reader on? Do you break the book into sections and then into chapters? Is it all just chapters? And then what does each chapter look like? Obviously, you're a coach, you're into health, you're into mindset. Do the chapters include, general lessons, exercises? Can you give us a little more about the path you take the reader on through the book?
Yes, so first, of course, I revealed a little bit of my life and my story and why this book. There are 5 chapters on health. So we're tackling 5 life aspects: health, spirituality, career, finances, and relationships. Okay, so because I'm very biased as a nurse on health, seeing how people are assets to the healthcare system, 5 chapters on health. Then there is a chapter on spirituality. Then we discuss career in a separate chapter, and 2 finance chapters. I teach people how to get rid of credit card debt and build financial discipline to grow investments, which is in the next chapter on investment, financial growth, becoming financially independent, building tangible cash flowing assets that are unrelated to a job. Extremely important. The relationship chapter, and there are several chapters with exercises on building self-confidence, analyzing your fears, where they come from, how to work with them. There is a chapter on lifelong learning, how to the mind fitness. So I mean, the mind is just like the body. John, you have fitness, nutrition for the body, you have detox for the body, and then you have the same exact things for your mind. Nutrition, which is the inspiration. You have fitness for the mind, which is the lifelong learning of concepts that are difficult to you to understand, but you make yourself understand in order to stay current and not get old too fast in a very rapidly technologically driven society, and not become obsolete by not learning for the rest of your life. And of course, the mind what did I say? So it was the nutrition for the mind, spirituality, and the detox for the mind, which is various forms of meditation to remove all the petty, unuseful thoughts from your day, clear your mind completely so you can absorb inspiration and learning again and again and again. The same thing goes with the body. They're not separate. They're extremely connected. And when you look into mindset, it's all about how you challenge yourself, which is the learning aspect of unfamiliar concepts, how you clear your mind from the things that are obstacles to your personal growth, and then how you keep it nourished. And that is the inspirational part, which is not necessarily the challenging fitness part for the mind, which is the lifelong learning of stressful stuff that makes you really turn your mind around and challenge yourself to be different and not be afraid of new concepts. It's a very interesting mesh of events that you allow into your life. And there's also a lot of talking about integrity and time management. When the relationship chapter is also interesting, because who we choose to be around can influence everything else in our lives. And people take poor influence for a variety of reasons in their health, financial, career aspects from well-intentioned people that just don't know much about your actual needs, and you don't challenge yourself to really explore who you are and what you want in all these other aspects. You won't get very far, I'm afraid. So this is what the book is about, and overcoming poor self-confidence and poor self-esteem through all these processes. That's the main focus on the book.
Yeah, I love that it's kind of an umbrella of mindset that touches all these areas, because it's amazing that you can use that same kind of study of an area. How do I look at it? What am I tolerating? What can I bring to the table? How can I improve? What are the exercises I could do to improve this? Those questions apply to, I don't know the exercises you have in the book or the specifics, but I'm just in general thinking the approach that you have to one is the way that you could have it to all. There's the same kind of questions, whether it's health, finance. The other question I wanted to ask is when you mentioned that one of the chapters is spirituality, where does that come from with you? Have you always been spiritual? Is it a family kind of religious spirituality thing? Where does that originate with you, for you, Alexandra?
So I'm not religious. Spirituality for me is being able to keep your sanity through all the challenges of your life and stay inspired. So I used to have a very cluttered brain with all sorts of petty thoughts and anxiety, anger, all the bad things that prevent you from making progress with your personal growth and any other type of growth. So I had to learn to meditate in very different ways to get all that mind garbage out of my head. And that took a lot of practice. So clear mind, that's the most important part, the beginning of for me, for as far as spirituality goes. And I do like the Zen, the Buddhist perspective of the human not being dual, mind and body and soul, but it's the same thing, because your mind will not manifest without your body, and your body won't do much without a clear mind and a knowledgeable mind. So I don't like the dualism of Christianity necessarily. So I like Buddhism for that reason, because it looks at the person, at the whole thing, holistic approach. And so once you clear the mind, then you need to keep it inspired. So sources of inspiration, I have given some examples of inspirational sources that have worked for me and why it worked for me. And then you go into this whole dilemma of doing the right thing no matter what, which is to me important in the spiritual aspect of life, because certain compromises are okay, but then there are other compromises that are absolutely not okay. And you need to be aware of whose sake you're compromising for. Is it yours or somebody else's, or a combination, and how this is going to affect the next 10, 20, 30 years of your consciousness, and how it's going to influence if you don't do the right thing when you are supposed to do the right thing. That's an important part of psychology in humans, and we're confronted with these decisions every day. So the spiritual chapter discusses this with certain examples from people I know and my own. And I think it helps bridge that gap, because you got to burn certain bridges. in order to prosper. And it could be with certain people with certain ideas. And the hardest bridge to burn really is between you and your own limiting beliefs, because they're just so hardly ingrained in you. And I found this the most challenging in my personal experience. So I discuss it in that chapter 8 on spirituality, because it's very important to me and other people I know from conversations.
Yeah, I like how you bring up the idea of inspiration. Obviously, motivation drivers have come up in this series before, but I don't think that that particular mention of what inspires us, finding what inspires us. I don't know, like you look around at certain people, what they're doing with their life, what they're tolerating, how they're living, not judgment, but just observations.
Right.
And you wonder if they've found their inspiration. You know, have you found your inspiration to move forward, to improve, whatever it may be? I think so many people kind of just settle into the safety of what they
Yes.
have going on with their lives. This safety is enough. It provides me ability to live. I'm not in any danger. I have a home. Everything is covered. I have food. But then they're not inspired to more, whether they want to or not, whether they know they can or not. It's just fascinating where some people just haven't found their inspiration.
Many people, yeah, they just settle with their immediate necessities and they don't venture beyond that. It's sad to see, because they have so much more potential, and
Yeah.
they're not even curious about discovering what else they can do. I see this, yeah, a lot, and you do as well, of course. It's all around us.
Alexandra, in writing it, I'm curious, did anything change in you? I'm always curious about the authors that I have on the show. And as they're writing their book, was there anything that evolved in your thinking, new ways in which you saw things, aha moments that you had, new connections you made? Was there anything that stood out or changed in you aside from the writing process? Because you come from another country, another language, and we talked about going back and forth with your editor. You're editing for 6 months to a year because you were concerned about the translation and understanding language and getting that clarity. Aside from the writing process, was there anything that stood out for you? Just anything that evolved in the way you tackle what you wrote about, in the way you think about it?
Absolutely, John. Yes, it did. I will never forget, I watched a promotional video of Jack Canfield when he was selling a book writing course, which I never bought, but I watched the video. It was 18 minutes. And the main point that stuck with me, he said, believe me, if you write a book, it's going to change you as a person. That really impressed me. And that was many years ago, way before I ever thought about writing a book, because I had no idea what I was going to write at the time. But that's why I didn't buy the course, because I didn't have a clear idea what I wanted. But it changed me, because the book is all about accountability, self-discipline, integrity. And I thought I was self-accountable before I wrote the book, but once I wrote it and put it out there, that just increased my responsibility towards myself and my readers and everybody else around, like tenfold.
Yeah.
Tenfold. And you, especially when you read your own book 40, 50 times, editing and then knowing those ideas that you had and you expressed very genuinely, but then they really sink in, and it completely increases your level of self-accountability at that point, if the book is about accountability, obviously, because everybody has different ideas about books. But in my case, I just became even more vigilant with my thought process and my actions every day. It was tremendously helpful, and because it allowed me to accomplish even more than I thought I could. And that's the purpose of writing something like this, and close a period of your life and open a new period of your life with even more desire to learn and accomplish. So yeah, that was a great change. Mm-hmm.
What do you believe is next for your writing? Have you written anything since? I know it's been a couple of years, or do you plan to write more? If there is a general idea in the future, do you know what you would write on?
Well, because the website, we established the website where people can purchase the book, the paperback copy in the US, I had to start a blog. So I'm writing periodically articles from my blog. It's not a scheduled thing. It's just when I have a good idea, then I write about it and elaborate on it. But as far as book, well, no, because the whole idea of the book was people take this book, and if they apply 80, 90% of the book, they can change their lives in so many positive directions. And then when I started interviewing with the hosts, that was the other positive change that happened. I had to develop better conversation skills with interviewing, and then I started my videos on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. So a different, you talk from a script and you learn to relax in front of camera. Then having a genuine conversation like you and I are having right now, that's a whole different skill, which I didn't have before. And of course, it's a huge learning curve. I'm at the beginning. I have no illusions that I'm anywhere near being decent at it yet. But I'm happy that this opportunity opened because my publisher said, you need to come out, you need to talk on podcasts, you need to start a blog, you need to get out there and show your face. And I'm like, really? That's not what I really expected. That book said you have huge competition. And if you don't come out as who you are and present your book, the book is not going to present you. So that's how it all happened. And that was another really wonderful benefit of writing the book. But then coaches, hosts and audience members started, so you're a coach, right? I said, no, I don't coach. I'm not a coach. That was in 2022, in 2021. And they was like, but isn't the book a brochure, like a advertising material for your coaching? I said, no, the book is the purpose of the book.
So your coaching came after the book came out?
Afterwards, yes. I'm not like most coaches who write little books and mention a little bit about their business to attract customers. The book is the coaching. And the expectation is you spend minimal amount of money on a book and you change your life tremendously without expensive coaching, because that was the purpose of the book in the first place. But then everybody said, you're a coach, right? You're not a coach? Why not a coach? You coach, correct? And eventually I said, well, why not? After all, why not?
And that's a question I forgot to ask. Was I always ask people who go from, and obviously you've maintained different employment and businesses, but I always ask people when they go out on their own, what was it that triggered that moment where they're like, okay, I don't want to be a coach for a company or any kind of position for a company. I want to go out on my own. I forgot to ask that about you. That's interesting that you developed the coaching out of the book and out of people asking that question.
Yeah, it was demand mostly because many people go into coaching when they don't want to work anymore because they're afraid to work. They don't want to be employees, or they don't want to own a responsible business that actually holds them accountable. And then I'm going to coach you how to live life. Well, great, but I'm not about that. I'm not afraid to work for somebody, and I'm not afraid to have my own businesses. I think they're both very valuable experience, humbling in different ways, inspiring in different ways, because you're useful to people in different ways, as a business owner and as an employee. And it's very nice to have one leg in each bucket so you can have very realistic perspective about these two aspects of life. And the coaching business really came because people asked for it. And I don't need clients to survive, absolutely not, because I can stop working today as a nurse and I'll be perfectly fine with my investment income. I'm at the point where I really don't need to work, but it's so important to stay tuned to the healthcare system so I can stay away from the healthcare system as a patient for as long as I can, because you learn incredibly much from the patients, and the ability to help them understand how they can stop being assets to the healthcare system is what really keeps me working in an increasingly frustrating healthcare system. Okay, so I don't want to give up on that, because then I'll be like a quitter, and I don't want to quit for purely stubbornness reasons, not financial reasons. And so the business, it came out of the book. So people say, okay, well, I want to be your student, I want to be your trainee. I say, well, why don't you buy the ebook for $6.99 first and see what you can learn from the book, and then decide if you want to spend $3,500 for 12-week coaching. Well, I give people access for a year after that for free. They can access me and ask questions, which I always encourage, because if they call me multiple times, that means they're actually working on their life. And if they don't call, I know that they gave up after that. But the book was not an advertising to a coaching business. It was exactly the other way around.
So, I mean, the question was about writing. You had mentioned your blog. Any hope for later to write another book?
If I have something decent to say to people that warrants writing of a book, yes, but I don't want to be like a graphomaniac. There are people that have written 75, 76 books, and I'm like, that's really not highly.
You don't want to write 75 books?
No, because how many times can you say things differently? No, you're just perpetuating. You're creating like a money machine, which is not at all what a book should be about.
And I was just curious if there were in writing this book, if you realized that there were other areas you wanted to expand on, or other complementary areas, supplemental areas that kind of tie into this.
There might be. There might be in the future, but I mean, not hurry at
As
all
of right
to
now.
produce another book and make money off of it. It's just really, it was a passion thing mostly, and it's not a conveyor or like a serial production of. I'm not about that at all. I actually resent it in many ways in some authors, because I think after 3-4 books, you already said what you have to say.
Yeah, it's kind of just repackaged, repurposed.
Exactly. So no, it's not my thing. But thanks for
Alexandra,
asking.
if you could break this down for somebody to kind of entice them to come in for the message of this book, how would you speak to a prospective reader? What is that quick message you would give them about the book?
I'll just tell them that the biggest mistake I made was that I really waited to go through this midlife crisis to embrace a complete change in my life. And I'll tell them, if you're at a crossroads in your life, if you're going through a midlife crisis, or you really crave change but you don't know how to go about it, buy this book to see that it's been done before. And that's the way I got inspired, John, in many ways, when I read the stories of people who were much worse than mine, and they accomplished so much more than I did. And I figured, if somebody else can do it, I can do it. And all the messages in my chapters are basically, look, if I could do this, you can do it. And it's all about this encouragement and nourishment of the person. I'll tell them, get the book, because you will see that many things are doable that you don't think you can at first. And you will embrace your fears. You will accomplish your dream by breaking it into smaller goals. And you will go about these goals in spite of your fear. And you will turn anxiety into a self-motivating factor. That's the biggest message in the book. And that's how I entice people to buy it, because I'll say, yeah, I know you're afraid. I've been there. I can be afraid every day. I just live with it, and I do it regardless, because it's never as bad at the end. When you look at the end of it, they say, oh, that wasn't so bad. It's always the same thing. I always succeed in what I want to do. But and now I don't take so much time to convince myself, but for the first 10 years or it was a constant struggle within my own mindset. And I tell people, I know your mindset, I understand where you're coming from. I've lived that. So don't relax, read the book, see what you can get from it, and then go for it.
Yeah, there's two things you said there about fear that are interesting, that are amazing observations. Just that you still feel fear. Fear is something that you live with. It's always going to be there at some level or another, one way or another. It's going to be there. And then the other one is that in the end, whatever you were afraid of is never as bad as the fear that you had.
That's right.
And it's incredible how anytime I've had fear of something in my life, that's why finally as an adult, I understood that quote where the only thing you have to fear is fear itself. As an adult, that kind of, and there are instances where there are grave or urgent circumstances, but most of the time, like, what you feel before you do anything, that fear is so much worse than the actual action, the what you end up doing.
That's right. And it's also interesting, John, when you make fear and anxiety work for you, they actually tend to shift focus. They always shift to where you're not sufficient.
Exactly.
And that's how you learn to say, okay, so that's where I'm missing. So I'm anxious about it. So I better, tone up in that area and not be so anxious about it. And it works. It guides you. It guides you. It doesn't paralyze you anymore, because I was paralyzed for a long time. So I've learned to work with fear and anxiety. I turn them into allies. Okay, they're my friends now, because they tell me exactly what I suck at, and they're right. It's interesting how that works, because now it's all about honesty and integrity. It's not so much about perceived fears that you just want to show off that you're some kind of a deep person with fear of everything. Because musicians and artists, I mean, we're can be very mentally unstable on multiple levels. But fear is a great teacher. Pain is a great teacher. That I learned from martial arts. But the pain is a wonderful teacher. So I'm not afraid of these anymore. I work with them and make them work for me. So it's doable. Seriously, if I could do it, anybody can do it. Because I was all about being paralyzed by ideas, and that's nothing like this anymore.
That's incredible. Alexandra, what book has inspired you or made an impact on you? Is there one that stands out?
Oh, there are several. It's not just one, of course, but The Success Principles of Jack Canfield was an incredible book because it teaches about taking responsibility and stopping complaining. And I was a huge complainer, so that made a huge impact on me. And interestingly, it was suggested by the Rich Dad Company, Robert and Kim Kiyosaki, when I started the mentorship on financial independence and real estate. First thing they addressed was taking responsibility for your life. It wasn't even, they weren't even talking about investing in the first several modules of their training. And so they had the first chapter of Jack Canfield in the module, which prompted me to buy the whole book. After I read the chapters, I read the whole book. Then the Dale Carnegie books have been great. Several investor books like Robert Allen's Creating Wealth. That's a fascinating book. I've read it 3 times. It's not only his strategies for investing, but truly the idea that rich is a mindset. It's a game. It's a game with yourself, game about money, but how you look at it with the abundance aspect rather than the scarcity aspect. Mm-hmm. And if you manage to apply this not just to your finances, but everything else in your life, because every idea can be connected to other aspects of your life besides the aspect that it comes from. Your health is a mindset. Your spirituality is a mindset. Your career is a mindset. Everything is a mindset. And I always connect between these 5 areas. That's another thing that the book helped me a lot with, because I had the idea before I wrote the book, but now with this book, I really transfer all the great ideas that I acquire in one area of my life. I inevitably transfer them to the other areas of my life. And it always works because it's the same damn principle. It's fascinating.
Yeah. That's what's fascinating about your book. Like you said, all these ideas, the question, the curiosity, the mindset, the fortitude, the questions, the anxiety, the fears, they're all foundations that you can utilize in each of those areas in your book. So I love that, because it's a great reminder that that same mindset you use in one area of your life, you can try to apply to others. Whether it's leadership, whether it's your relationships, whether it is finance, whether it is spirituality. I appreciate that. Yeah. And then finally, in beginning to wrap up, Alexandra, is there anything that you want to share? Anything that I might have missed? Anything you're up to these days? Something I should have asked, something I missed out on? The floor is yours, please.
Oh, well, great questions. Thank you really for having me, John. It was wonderful. The last thing I will say about fear and anxiety, once you feel them in certain areas of your life, the faster you turn these 2 emotions into curiosity, again, back to the child in you, you transform these emotions into curiosity. And then you will be able to overcome fear and anxiety much faster based on your curiosity on what is missing in your life and what you can do better without dreading it, but just being really curious and inquisitive about how you can do better in certain areas. That really, really has helped me and other people that I've talked with and presented that idea. It's truly a great transformational process for your mind, for your peace, and for basically continuing your life without, impediments of self-limitations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. I've gone through that same journey, still in it. Like you said, you still have those feelings, but then you just realize, like, that's what I love that you mentioned that it's just kind of like a warning. It's just a heads up. Hey, you need to focus on this. Hey, you're not doing that good at this. Not in a bad way, but it is, it's like an inner competition with yourself.
Yes, and not to get crushed by the fear, but inspired by it, motivated.
Exactly. Exactly.
You can go either direction. It's your choice, ultimately. It's your choice.
Yeah, it serves you if you let it, or it can incapacitate you. It can paralyze you if you let it. And the other thing that stands out because I'm on that same journey, I'm happy where I am in that journey. The other part is that freedom that you realize that exists when you get to that mindset, where before you're paralyzed, before you're holding yourself back. When you get to that point where you can utilize fear and anxiety as tools, it's like the world is yours. Whatever you choose to go after is there for the taking. Not everything will work out.
Of course.
But you have this freedom where you will explore more, you'll discover more. So it's the freedom in that realization about fear and anxiety has been absolutely amazing to feel, where going from my past life, much like yours, where you felt that paralysis, to now it's kind of like, I'm out here talking to different people, all of you, authors, non-authors alike. I never would have done this 10, 15 years ago.
Exactly.
And
When you
now I
take the
just kind of,
responsible risk. Yeah.
it's just, you dive in, and I've learned so much from talking to all of you. All of this came out of that exact experience of turning fear and anxiety on its head, living with it, not trying to suppress it or keep it out of
Right.
your life, but inviting it in and saying, okay, what is realistic here and what isn't, and what can I do? And if it doesn't work out, what can I, constant experimentation and self-assessment.
Yes, and responsible risk taking, because you understand there is risk in everything that is not going to work out. And
Yeah.
that, again, is element of fear. But
Mhm.
you increase your risk threshold, take it responsibly, and if it doesn't pan out, you try a different way or something else. You just never give up, and you always work on it. It's really worth it. It's a worth process for everybody, I think. And it's regretful that many people wouldn't embrace it just because of,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you get to that point where you understand that you're a work in progress. You are going to achieve certain goals. But for me, part of that living with the fear and thriving through fear and anxiety is understanding that it's a constant journey, that it's not
Right.
going to be wrapped up in one day. It's not going to be a beautiful present wrapped up in one day, one experience, one session if you go to therapy. But it is constant work, and it is a great journey to be on if you have that curiosity.
Absolutely. It never stops. That's for sure.
And again, we covered Alexandra's own book. It really is simple, a holistic approach to self-confidence, a practical guide. Alexandra, thank you so much for sitting down with me for this conversation.
It was a pleasure, John. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Absolutely. This is awesome. If there's anything I might have missed, anything that you feel I should have asked Alexandra while I had her here, I ask my own tangent questions, but anything that you feel I could have asked, anything you heard in her story that you're curious about, reach out to me. I'll reach out to her, see what kind of additional insights, knowledge, guidance I can get. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.